This is presentation number 4. Hello, this is Steve Potasic, Superintendent, Jacksonville School District 117. This is the 4th online presentation in a series covering the district's reboundary process initiated to develop elementary boundaries for all students following the closure of Franklin Elementary. This presentation is an update covering the 3 June and July committee meetings. The committee consists of all 7 board members, central office staff, elementary and middle school principals, and elementary teachers. As a reminder, this process is being done very early. School boundaries will not change until the fall of 2018 to coincide with the move of the 6th grade students to Jacksonville Middle School. The previous 3 presentations can be found at www.jsd117.org. You can watch them as YouTube videos or download as PowerPoint presentations and watch at your own pace. If you choose the PowerPoint option, you will have to run in slideshow mode to listen to the audio and watch the animations. I want to highlight some of the items from the 3rd presentation. That presentation includes a discussion on the benefits of a district-wide boundary process. This process will increase our staffing efficiencies, allowing the district the opportunity to provide more services, including increased elective opportunities for our 6th grade students at the new middle school. That presentation also covers the development of the boundary for Murrayville-Woodson Elementary School. Since the last boundary presentation, we have launched a new JSD117.org. The boundary presentations can be accessed from the main page by clicking on the online boundary presentation link. The original plan was that the committee would develop 2 scenarios. The first was to be developed during the June 28th meeting, and the second was to be developed at the July 12th meeting. As previously noted, the committee developed the Murrayville-Woodson boundary at the May 8th meeting. This map served as the template for further scenario work. I want to highlight that the exterior boundaries are simply there to capture students into a region and do not represent the actual boundary locations themselves. The only places throughout this process that the boundaries are in exact locations are when they are on specific land items such as roads and railroad tracks. The next logical boundary step was to move north from Murrayville-Woodson and explore if there were multiple ways that the south boundary could be defined. As stated in the last presentation, our plan was to develop one scenario by expanding South Elementary west along Morton Avenue, and one by expanding South Elementary north into the Franklin area. South lost students to Murrayville-Woodson and needs to expand. During the June 28th meeting, the committee developed a scenario from the first option. We called this the South Layered option since it created a layer across the Murrayville-Woodson boundary. Our plan was to develop Scenario 2 at the July 12th meeting following the other South Elementary expansion option. We started working on the new scenario. We had labeled this the block approach. However, when we attempted to draw boundary lines for South Elementary, we faced a major obstacle. The high density of students north of Morton made it extremely difficult to expand South Elementary north of Morton without severely overcrowding the school. After multiple attempts, it became obvious that the block approach was not a viable option. Even after multiple attempts, the committee was unable to develop a second scenario that fit within the individual school limits. In effect, the committee was stuck, and it looked like we were only going to be able to provide one scenario to the public for commentary and feedback. That was until the end of the meeting. After the meeting was over, a community member attending approached me with an idea. At first, I was apprehensive that the idea would work since it included moving an extremely high density area from one school to another that was already at capacity. But since it did include some other changes, I stated I would thoroughly evaluate the scenario. Over the next 2 days, I was extremely excited that this idea provided a viable second option. I was also extremely excited that this option was developed directly from community input. At the July 19th meeting, the committee approved both scenarios to be issued for public feedback. So let's look at the two scenarios. First, any viable scenario needs to fit within our defined school capacities. As explained in a previous presentation, the boundaries will be developed with 4 of our elementary schools having 2 classes per grade level, and 2, Murrayville, Woodson, and North, having 1 class per grade level. Since we have an ideal goal of 24 students per class, this establishes 4 schools having a capacity of 288 students, and 2 schools having a capacity of 144 students. That gives us a total capacity of 1,440 students. We currently have 1,414 K through 5 students. Once again, these parameters will help maximize our services throughout the district by minimizing our K through 5 regular education staffing needs. As you can see by these charts, both scenarios fit. I want to highlight that we also look at other factors when determining the maximum capacity at each school. The input of teachers on the committee has been extremely helpful in clarifying the importance of lower class sizes in schools that have a higher volume of at-risk factors. The research on poverty and its impact on education is well documented. Furthermore, the impact of poverty on education is even more pronounced in minority groups. For example, in scenario 1, Eisenhower has 302 students with a capacity of 288 students. However, Eisenhower has the lowest volume of risk factors. The staff was confident that the average class size of 25.2 students would not have an adverse impact on the school. Also, these numbers include 51 students that are in special programs and will not end up counting towards the average K through 5 class size. Here is an overview of scenario 1. This image includes the updated, accurate JSD 117 exterior boundary. From this view, 2 major changes are obvious. The first is the new boundary for Murrayville-Woodson along Interstate 72. The second is the expansion of the Eisenhower district north of 104. Each dot represents a K through 5 student from last year. The yellow dots represent a student that attended Murrayville-Woodson last year. Orange dots are south. Light blue are Eisenhower. Dark blue are Washington. Pink are Lincoln. And green are students from North. I will also show 2 levels of zoomed images for each scenario to more accurately show the scenario boundaries. This zoomed-in image highlights the changes for Eisenhower. It also shows the changes in the area north of Walnut and east of Main. Those students are currently going to Lincoln and will change to North with this scenario. This even further zoomed image helps show the exact streets for scenario 1. Washington's boundaries have not really changed, other than expanding into the Franklin area down College Avenue. This area that used to go to North will be going to Eisenhower in scenario 1. Just to the south, there has been a slight change in the Lincoln boundary as it has been moved from Sandusky to Caldwell. So this group of students that were once Lincoln students will be attending Eisenhower in scenario 1. You can also see that the Prairie Knolls and Rolling Acres subdivisions will be attending South Elementary. This image also helps clarify the changes from Lincoln to north of Walnut. And I also want to highlight this area right here. This is on Massey, just to the east of Walmart. This has always been Eisenhower because an Eisenhower bus picks the students up across the street. This was made years ago to help reduce busing expenses. Notice that the two students here are light blue and attended Eisenhower last year. These small possible changes will be examined in more detail when we look at the impact on our transportation budget. This is scenario 2. From this view, the most obvious difference from scenario 1 is that the area north of 104 remains in North Elementary. South has also been expanded to Highway 67. Both of these changes were needed to free up space in Eisenhower for the major change that will be shown as we zoom in. I want to highlight that Murrayville-Woodson and Washington are the same in both scenarios. Here is the first zoomed image for scenario 2. All of the important changes in this scenario are better highlighted at the next image. If you're watching on YouTube, please pause as needed to examine these images in more detail. This close-up more accurately shows the differences between scenario 1 and 2. The major change is that the entire Appleby Farms area and the Northwoods Mobile Home Park just east of Sandusky will be going to Eisenhower in scenario 2. Also, in this scenario, the western edge of Lincoln has been drawn at Sandusky. This means that the current North Elementary area between Sandusky and Caldwell will be attending Lincoln, and the North Elementary area to the west will be attending Eisenhower. One more difference to highlight is that in this scenario, Prairie Knolls will be attending North Elementary, while Rolling Acres remains at South. Here are some data charts to further analyze and compare both scenarios. Here's the demographic analysis chart for scenario 1 I presented to the committee. This image has an extensive narration, but the explanation can be used for further slides. In each measured area, the current column represents the students attending school last year, and the after column represents the school's numbers if that scenario is chosen. Let's first look at the economic section, and I'll use Eisenhower as an example. Our economic indicators are broken into 3 categories based upon lunch status. The first, auto. This line represents the percent of students from families that are participating in some form of federal assistance program and therefore automatically are included in the federal free lunch program. The next line that says free/RED, well, RED stands for reduced. This is the percent of students that are not automatically enrolled in the free lunch program, but are enrolled in either the free or reduced cost program based on the information they supply the district. We are seeing a trend of the percent in this category dropping as the auto category increases. The full line shows the percent of students that do not qualify for free or reduced lunch. Full means full pay. Of course, if the school has been approved for the CEP lunch program, then all of the students get a free lunch regardless of the individual category. But we do use these categories for school fees and as risk factors in our school improvement. The full line indicates the least risk. Once again, the correlation between poverty and educational risk is highly documented. This chart goes through a similar analysis based upon the race demographic for each school for the scenario. Each school also has a chart showing the change in the number of students per grade level. This chart shows that the overall goal of maximizing our K-5 staff through the staffing capacity plan has been met. It has been met in both scenarios. One obvious criticism of this approach in analyzing enrollments is that these students will not be the same students in 2018-2019. Last year's 4th and 5th graders will be at the middle school that year. However, if you look year to year, you will see a relatively consistent student density trend in each boundary area. Basically, as kids leave, a similar number of students from the same neighborhoods enter. This is the only way we can predict future boundary enrollments. However, because we are using predicted numbers, we will examine the actual impact 5 years from now with a boundary review. The last chart in the individual school boxes, right here, shows an early analysis of the possibility that the district can provide the grandfathering option for the 5th grade students in the 2018-2019 school year. Those students were in the 3rd grade last year. The numbers indicate that we would have to hire 2 extra teachers for 1 year to provide this option and ensure we do not overcrowd a school. For example, South currently has 48 students that were in the 3rd grade last year that will be in the 5th grade in 2018-2019 in the new Scenario 1 boundary. There are also 7 students that were in that class that would be leaving due to the boundary change. If we allowed them to stay at South, that would total 55 possible students at that grade level. The Y or yes mark indicates we could allow grandfathering without increasing staff at South Elementary. Lincoln, on the other hand, has 62 students, which is an anomaly. There are also 13 transferring to other schools. If we allowed grandfathering, we would have to hire an extra 5th grade teacher for 1 year to split those 75 students into 3 separate classes. One of our primary goals in this boundary process is to have an equitable solution, but another is to minimize the impact on the community by minimizing changes in current boundaries. On occasion, these two goals can be in conflict. There has to be a balance. I've provided 2 charts to show the impact on the community, and these are the students affected chart and the Franklin Choice Changes chart. I've provided the economic and racial demographic numbers for both charts. I also provided the total district percentages, as shown in the gray columns, to compare those affected to the entire district population. I removed, as shown here, does not include Franklin Choice or special program students. I removed those students from the top chart because they are not directly impacted by the boundary changes themselves. The Franklin students currently do not have a boundary, and I've provided the information on them below. The special program students are placed in specific classes which are not affected by the boundaries. In Scenario 1, there are 115 K-5 students in the changing boundary areas, but the boundaries will only have an impact on last year's K-3 students since the older students will be at Jacksonville Middle School. So in Scenario 1, there are 75 K-3 students affected by the scenario. The chart on the right shows the total number of students affected from each school. For example, in Scenario 1, there are 6 students leaving Eisenhower for other schools and 58 students having their boundaries changed to attend Eisenhower. I provided similar data for the Franklin students in the chart below. Here's the demographic change chart for Scenario 2. I will have at least a 10-second pause on all charts that do not need further clarification. If you want to examine these charts in more detail, either pause the YouTube video or download the PowerPoint presentation. Now I will present a series of charts comparing each scenario side by side for each individual school. I will also show a comparison of the total affected chart and the Franklin change charts. In each chart, S1 represents Scenario 1 and S2 represents Scenario 2. Here is a comparison chart for Eisenhower. Here's the comparison chart for Lincoln. Here is the comparison chart for North. Here is the comparison chart for South. Here is the comparison chart for Murrayville-Woodson, but please notice that Murrayville-Woodson is identical in both Scenario 1 and Scenario 2. Washington is also identical in both Scenario 1 and Scenario 2. Here is a comparison chart of the students affected by the boundary changes. And here is a comparison chart of the difference between the scenarios on the Franklin choice students. Here are our plans moving forward. From August 1st through August 31st, both plans will be made available for community input. By August 1st, the public will be provided with a link to a feedback survey. The survey will remain open throughout the month of August. Once the survey is over, I will provide the committee with the feedback. On September 6th, the committee will meet at 6 p.m. at the Jacksonville High School cafeteria to analyze the feedback and decide if one plan is ready to be issued to the Board of Education for approval. Do the plans need further development or tweaking? And do we need possible further community input before we move forward? Thank you very much for being involved with this extremely important event for the district and for the community. Please look for the survey next week. We want your feedback. We want your input. Thank you again.